Everyone knows that mental health is a big thing, though it can still be quite taboo in some cases. We have come a long way in the last few decades. There are some mental health conditions that have been brought into the eye of the public a lot more, even normalized. Anxiety and depression, for example. Some, though, are still rife with disinformation and simplification. Although people mean well, conditions such as ADHD, OCD, and bipolar are often simplified and joked about. If they aren't, it's a lot of overused stereotypes. Shows like Monk for OCD or Law and Order SVU for bipolar disorder focus on the stereotypes. There are some shows that do a lot better with these issues, though. One such show would be Takin Over the Asylum by Donna Francis Child. This 1994 miniseries stars an alcoholic radio DJ trying to make it after getting fired from his last gig. Eddie McKenna, played by Ken Stott, as you may know as Balin from The Hobbit, is forced to maintain 2 jobs just to keep afloat. A Windows salesman by day and a radio DJ by, well, later that day. After getting fired at his initial radio job, he picks up a job at St. Jude's, a local psych hospital. He has to start the local station back up again after years of disuse. With the help of the ward's patients, it's able to get back on its feet. This doesn't happen without a lot of hard work, though. We get to know the cast pretty well thanks to that. First off, if you're anything like me, the main actor that you know from this is David Tennant, of Doctor Who and Good Omens fame. The young Tennant makes good use of his native Scottish accent while playing the character of Campbell, a character with bipolar, who becomes very involved in running the station once Eddie shows him the ropes. The other characters, though they feature quite prominently, really are more side characters than anything. There's Fergus, a schizophrenic electrical engineer who is known for his escape attempts, played by Angus MacFadyen, seen as Robert the Bruce in Braveheart. Then Francine, a depressed woman who self-harms, is played by Katie Murphy, who is also known for playing Katie Andrews in Mike and Angelo. And the last of what I'd call the major secondary characters is Rosalie, a woman with severe OCD played by Ruth McCabe, who is also known for playing Margaret McCutcheon of Any Time Now. As any good characters, they have their ups and downs. Overall, I feel they portray these conditions rather well. Although they are in hospital, they are still portrayed as multifaceted people, not just a walking poster for their condition. Now, as we've covered before in other videos, mental health wasn't always seen as, well, mental health. It was often seen as part of a physical problem, if not something to do with issues beyond our comprehension, whether that be religion-based or something astrological. It was many years before we saw mental health for what it is. Even then, a lot was misunderstood. An easy go-to example would be the practice of locking women up for merely expressing emotions, blaming hysteria for any and everything. Even so recently as the 1950s by some sources, asylums remained open. These asylums and their effects on patients is, at least in part, inspired fiction, such as DC Comics' Batman's Arkham Asylum and the villains within it. This continues a long history of shaming and fearing those with mental illness. As these fictional stories about asylums increased in frequency, so did the misconceptions about mental illness. It is within this environment that series such as Takin Over the Asylum blossom. This is where Takin Over the Asylum comes in with a goal, to show that patients in a psychiatric hospital are just people in need of help. While it does generally keep a light tone, the show does show multiple conditions that affect people. Let's explore that more. Let's start off with Campbell. Back in 1994, Campbell's diagnosis was known as manic depressive. These days, however, we call the condition bipolar disorder, characterized by the presence of both mania, excitable high moods often accompanied by a feeling of ideas coming so fast that one may feel pressure to fill the silence, a heightened sense of importance or ability, or even irritability, and depression, low mood, low self-esteem, slow speech and movement, and can be accompanied by suicidal thoughts. In Campbell, we mostly see mania, the high mood. Despite his mania being a driving force in the story, it is far from his only character trait. Even before his manic interest in the radio show, Campbell showed a deep interest in music. I feel that, for the time, it was okay representation. While it didn't show a lot on the depression side, bipolar doesn't always have a focus on depression. In Bipolar 1, a person has to have at least one episode of mania, but having depression is not required for a diagnosis of Bipolar 1. With the focus on mania, it shows the heightened energy, poor sleep, and restlessness as both a negative as well as a positive. It shows, in my opinion, diverse situations within the hospital environment. It shows Campbell as a young man who uses his energy for his creative, musical endeavors. He used his fast-paced thoughts and speech to his advantage as a DJ. In helping Eddie to get St. Jude's Hospital Radio up and running again, he even faked a manic episode in order to keep training as a DJ under Eddie. He was determined to make this work, much to the displeasure of his parents. Here is one of my favorite quotes by Campbell about this.
Inspired is when you think you can do anything. Manic is when you know it.
It is that high-energy approach to radio that, in the end, was able to get him potentially into the industry. He is, and has been, crucial to the formation of the radio station. Without Campbell, Taking Over the Asylum wouldn't be what it is. Both the focus on mental health and DJing center Campbell as a crucial character. As much of a crucial character that he is, Campbell does a great job at highlighting other characters. Other characters such as Fergus. Fergus is an interesting character for sure. It is clear that Angus McFadden had fun playing the character, the electrician who near constantly escapes from the hospital, only to come back later that day. He is the one who often helps keep the station on the air, whether that be fixing the mixing board that's on the fritz or getting monitoring equipment for Campbell. He is willing to help out however he can, keeping high spirits, despite often being the one who quietly lurks around the ward. Barring a casual mention of hearing voices, his schizophrenia isn't really brought up in the story. I can't personally say how positive the representation of schizophrenia is within the show. All that can be said is that Fergus experiences auditory hallucinations. This symptom of schizophrenia is very commonly portrayed in media, so that is something that I feel is fairly simple to identify, even by those who don't really know what they're looking for to identify it. That being said, technically, auditory hallucinations are not exclusive to schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder. I can say that in his mention of auditory hallucinations, Fergus doesn't shy away from mentioning the stigma that this brings him, saying,
"Well, nobody wants to hire a loony. Might do something weird."
He often escapes because he gets bored, returning because he is being held involuntarily, because, as detailed under Scotland's Mental Health Act, Fergus is classified as a danger to himself or others. He doesn't divulge much about that to Eddie or to the audience, however. Overall, he is one of the quieter side characters, just lurking in the background, much like the next character I'd like to discuss, Rosalie. Rosalie is a character that does a lot in the background of the show initially. Her need for organization is, I feel, a double-edged sword. While it helps the hospital radio station, especially in the beginning, it is clear that Rosalie's OCD causes a lot of trouble in her life. Now, I may be biased due to my own diagnosis of OCD, but I find that episode 3, where her husband comes to visit and the audience learns more about the extent of her disorder, is quite powerful. Despite Rosalie being a side character, she is by no means shoved to the side or forgotten about. It is rather the opposite in the latter 4 episodes of Taking Over the Asylum. As mentioned a moment ago, she is the one keeping the station organized. Well, alright, I can get behind this part of Rosalie's character. I do find myself wondering how much of this, although well-meaning, leans into tropes, despite otherwise decent representation. However, for now I'm going to put a pin in that, to discuss it more at length a bit later in this conversation. Rosalie is a good example of how conditions like OCD are not short-term or one-and-done issues. As is brought up, it has been 12 years of wearing the same clothes, of her compulsions worsening since the death of her son. Even with help, with being in hospital, OCD is still a constant struggle. The further into the series you watch, the more apparent the struggles of all these characters are. The viewer can see Rosalie's compulsions at every turn, and, much like in real life, her internal struggle isn't really apparent to outside observers. We learned that, seemingly, her OCD was not helped by the commentary from her husband, especially during the time that their son was sick. She explains in the episode,
Robbie got sick. Jim said I wasn't washing the lettuce properly, so I washed it and washed it. But he was still sick. Jim said it was because the floors was dirty, so I washed them and washed them. But Robbie stayed sick. Jim said it was the drains, the toilet, the sinks, the dirty washing, the cutting board, the kitchen knives. I made lists of all the places the germs could be. I washed everything. But Robbie stayed sick until he died. I never managed to kill all those germs.
What did he die of?
Leukemia.
Rosalie.
Rosalie's story is well explored in that, in her case, there was an obvious trigger to her obsessions. At the end of the show, despite her still talking about her OCD, and even connecting with another person who has OCD, the point is made that her OCD symptoms have been improving with time, care, and medication. Though I feel that this is a strong, recurring theme throughout the show, there is no mental illness that is magically cured. You look at any character in the show. It's a range in the show from I'm well enough in society's eyes to get and potentially hold down a job, to I will be in and out of hospital often in order to look after my mental well-being, to really anything in between. It's linked quite intrinsically with the idea that the mentally ill don't often appear much, if any, different from the non-mentally ill or normal people. A character with which this point is often aimed towards is Francine. Francine is a quiet character, often just seen in the background until getting close with Eddie. In her initial conversation, she's seen as sarcastic, introverted. Francine is a woman who holds strong beliefs and emotions. She, though quiet, is also quite defensive. I personally believe that her sarcasm is a hearty defense mechanism. Francine is often seen by Eddie, much to his alarm, using her forearm to extinguish lit cigarettes. She uses a lack of ashtray to excuse the behavior, but this is obviously a flimsy cover for her self-harming behavior. She later tells Eddie that she does this because
some things can only be burned out.
She is also seen to be hugely defensive of the neighborhood stray and her kittens, becoming quite agitated upon contradiction surrounding them.
Oh, look! There's McTavish. He's a cat that lives in the ground. Oh, he's gone now. You can't pick him up with that because he's wild, but everybody knows him.
That's only a big black cat.
Aye, and dead fat.
Francine, I hate to break this to you, but he is a she, and she is pregnant.
He's not pregnant. He's just dead fat.
Oh, with those wee skinny legs. Francine, trust me, she's pregnant.
He's not pregnant. He's just fat. He's too much and he's fat, right?
Just fat.
Or even the mere idea of any harm coming to them. Francine goes so far as to adopt the kittens and hide them in her hospital room without permission. Upon having the sick kittens confiscated from her care and taken to a local shelter, Francine's mental health spirals rapidly. Around this time, it is revealed to the audience and Eddie, who has recently started a romantic relationship with Francine, that her depression and overall shaky state of mental health is something that is ongoing. Francine is shown to be in and out of hospital a few times within the latter half of the series. In my opinion, this isn't a terrible way to show a few different concepts to the audience. Firstly, an obvious revisit to the concept that has been threaded throughout Taking Over the Asylum. People who deal with mental illness aren't different in appearance than anybody else. And, of course, the secondary idea that mental health is a constant, ongoing part of people's lives. In addition to that, hospitals aren't always a one-time thing either. Something it doesn't explicitly say that I'd like to add on is this. That's okay. Mental health, just like physical health, is an ongoing task to keep up with. It also isn't always easy to diagnose or put a label on, as can be seen with Francine. How things changed. Now, a lot of things have changed since the series aired in the 1990s. There have been simple day-to-day changes, like how we talk about people with mental health problems, or technology changing, like the more widespread use of cell phones and the internet. Some treatments may have changed in medicine, and, in some circles at least, how people think about psychiatric hospitals has changed for the better. At least, some of the changes have been addressed in Donna Francis-Child's 2013 stage play of the same name. The play is a much condensed version of the overall series. The same general events take place, but not always identically to the then 21-year-old series. I noticed a lot of changes around the show's announcement and subsequent commencement of Mental Health Open Day. A lot of scenes got combined into this scene, or the rather hectic mess that follows. Some of these big changes were the removal of scenes with psychiatrists that further explored the specific mental health situations of the main characters. Fergus's whole unfortunate breakdown suicide was altered and only talked about in passing. Eddie and Francine's romantic subplot is significantly altered and or cut down, and overall, the latter part of the play seems really packed, and not in a good way. If I hadn't already been overly familiar with the source material, I do wonder if I would have had a hard time keeping track of what was going on as the story progressed. I will give the play credit, in that, at the end of the play, it was updated. The radio station started to broadcast its signal online, being listened to by patients on cell phones. That being said, there are some things I'm uncertain about, and some may take issue with. This brings us to representation, a double-edged sword. Now, let's take the pin out of that topic that we spoke about in Rosalie's section. Rosalie's OCD focuses on cleaning. This is openly addressed throughout the series. Campbell even says in episode 1,
Much as I hate to take advantage of someone's illness, but she did insist.
I'm compulsive, you see.
this is the start of where I'm uncertain about the extent of the representation within Takin over the Asylum. While the show does make it clear that these people are in need of help because of the state of their mental health, there's also the wacky side of mental illness that is shown. Rosalie's OCD is shown in a mixed light, as she does help with the management and cleanliness of the radio station. However, later in the show, her anxiety around germs is shown more seriously, especially around episode 3, as spoken about earlier. Although Rosalie is not the only one showing mental illness off as a dual-sided issue, early in the series, even in the first episode, Campbell's mania is being shown in a productive light as he composes sweepers, also known as branded radio station jingles, for the hospital's radio station. However, only a few episodes later, in episode 2, he fakes a manic episode in order to stay in the hospital, and thus keep broadcasting on the hospital's radio station. These are the two characters who I find have the biggest part in the series. Fergus is unfortunately not alive through the end of the series, and though I feel she has a significant part to play, the main part of Francine's story is that she continues to go in and out of hospital. Eddie, despite his alcoholism being shown throughout the series, doesn't have his own mental health focused on, given that he isn't a patient. Perhaps it's just me, but I do find myself wondering if the representations of bipolar and obsessive-compulsive disorder being taken advantage like this could shine a bit of a bad light, or even distrust on the show for certain viewers. However, this could also be explained by a few other explanations. 1. This could be part of Campbell's character peeking through, as he was the one taking charge in the station. Or 2. This could just be how Donna Francis-Child characterizes, well, her characters. A third unspoken reason could be that I'm overthinking and thus overanalyzing this part of the show, but let's move on. This show does toe the line of, this is what mental illness looks like, and people with these conditions have positive aspects too. Rosalie's organization, for example. Overall, I think it does show a good balance. Now, let's move on to part 2, radio. We have been discussing the existence of radio throughout this video already, but I believe this can and does deserve to be explored in more depth. Here in Canada, hospital radio stations are fairly rare. However, it seems a bit more common in the United Kingdom, enough that the main character, Eddie, can find 2 consecutive jobs in that specific industry. One at the very start of the show, which he is fired from, and the job which the show focuses on at St. Jude's Psychiatric Hospital. The practice of having hospital radio stations started and became common in the 20th century. The hospital radio was a common form of entertainment for those who were confined in bed. These days, though, it's most common in the UK. According to a 2020 article in the New York Times, over 200 such stations remain on the air, providing patients and families with much-needed comfort during hard times. The St. Jude's Hospital Radio is a huge part of the series. In the beginning of the series, it's obvious that the station is in a serious state of disarray and disuse. According to an offhand line at the beginning of episode 1, it hasn't been in use since the 70s, so for at least 10, probably over 15 years at that point, depending on when in the 70s they mean. This does play a fair part in the progression of the series and the station itself. Even after the station gets cleaned up, the mixing board is worse for wear. The board has crackling, dying channels, and has obviously been there, along with the microphones and other equipment, since the station shut down in the 70s. Takin over the Asylum also shows that getting a radio station off the ground and on the air, whether for the first time or after a long break, as with St. Jude's Hospital Station, is not an easy process. Replacing faulty equipment is not a cheap process. In the original series, just over £1,100 was raised to purchase a new board for the station. It is unclear how much of this equipment that Fergus bought second-hand at the auction actually costed him. If the full amount were used, it could be assumed that this would be enough to purchase a mid-range mixing desk at full price, or perhaps a higher-range desk second-hand. In the updated 2013 play, they are looking to raise only £600 to purchase a new mixer. From my research, it is probably somewhere between a Tascam M164UF mixer or an Allen & Heath XB10 or XB10 mixer. However, this wasn't too extensive of a search, and would probably be closer in age to the aforementioned Tascam, as Fergus seems to get his materials secondhand, or is encouraged by other characters to do so. In the 2013 play, it also puts a focus on the fact that the radio has a newfound presence on the internet. Technology plays a much bigger part in the play than in the original series, especially in the way it ends, though I'm not about to spoil that more than I already have. As someone who is interested in radio, my friends can attest to how much I like to, or at least want to, quote this show. Even if a lot has changed in the radio landscape since this show was made, it taught me a decent amount about how the system works. This is the show that taught me the importance of faders.
That was money, that's what I want.
Can't hear you, Campbell.
From way back in 1959.
Still can't hear you.
And this is Campbell Bain, the bane of your life.
Campbell.
Eddie, I'm a mentally ill person. If I shout any louder, I'll be restrained and sedated.
The fader, Campbell.
Well, I need that.
Okay, Campbell. We'll try it again.
It's a good reminder that no matter what an awesome event you put on, you can't underestimate the importance of inviting media outlets.
We staged a publicity stunt, a roadshow right in the middle of Argyle Street, and the police even came to break it up. Are you going to tell me that's not front page news?
What paper did you invite?
Invite? You mean you have to invite them? What's that not? Sort of cheapen it.
Through Campbell and even Francine's experience, I learned how important on-air experience is for any person looking to even try out radio. Though I didn't expect it, this show helped me learn quite a bit about demo reels or demo tapes as well. And with that, I think it's time for some final thoughts. Final thoughts. Overall, this show, Takin over the Asylum, has been an awesome part of my life. It helped me learn about radio broadcasting, explore mental health, and get to see some amazing actors. I would recommend it to those who want an interesting look at how psych hospitals have progressed, and a fun introduction to radio broadcasting. More people really do need to know about this show. As always, resources will be listed in the description below, as well as more information about this series. If you have any topics like this, topics about LGBTQIA+, or mental health that you would like to see covered, please leave those suggestions down in the comments below. Thanks for watching the OCD Enby. Stay safe out there.